It's a Sunday evening in 1968, and the most important object in the house is a piece of furniture. It sits against the living room wall, a long, low cabinet of real wood, polished, with a lamp and a row of family photographs arranged on top of it. In the center is a curved glass screen. This is the Zenith console television, and it is the heart of the home, the thing the whole family gathers around after dinner, the thing that brought the moon landing and the big game and the evening news into this room. Your father turns it on, and it doesn't snap to life. It warms up. A faint hum, a glow, and then the picture slowly blooms out of a single point of light into a full image. And then there's the magic trick, a small golden black wand on the arm of the chair. Press a button and it makes a soft click, and across the room, with no wire and no battery, the channel changes by itself. That television will run in this living room and then in a bedroom and then in a basement for the next 30 years. It was built by hand by a company that promised the quality went in before the name went on, and America let that company die for something cheaper. This is the story of Zenith. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. If you grew up with one, you don't remember it as a screen. You remember it as a piece of the room. You remember the cabinet. Heavy wood, often with little doors or a grill over the speaker, a surface solid enough to hold a lamp, a vase, the school portraits. You remember dusting it. You remember the warm-up, the wait after you turned it on, the picture swelling out of nothing, the way it took a moment to find its voice. You remember the dials, VHF on one knob, the long UHF band on another, and the satisfying chunk as you turned the channel before the clicker took over. You remember the repairman who came to your house with a case of glowing tubes and tested them one by one until your set lived again. You remember it being moved, promoted out of the living room when a newer set arrived, sent to the den, then a bedroom, then the basement, soldiering on for decades. And if your family had the remote, you remember the small war over who got to hold it. It wasn't a gadget you replaced, it was a member of the household. And inside, it was built unlike anything you can buy today. Open the back of one of those old Zeniths and you'd see something that looks insane by modern standards, and was the whole point. Inside was a dense, sprawling tangle of hand-soldered wires and components, a rat's nest, connecting tube to tube by hand. Long after competitors had switched to cheaper, faster printed circuit boards, Zenith was one of the very last holdouts still wiring much of its sets by hand. And they didn't hide it. They bragged about it. They called it handcrafted. That handcrafting is exactly why those sets lasted. A hand-built chassis with replaceable tubes could be diagnosed, opened, and fixed over and over for decades. When a tube burned out, and they did, you didn't throw the television away. You pulled the tube, took it to the drugstore tube tester, bought a replacement for $1 or $2, and the set lived another 5 years. It was a television built like a fine cabinet and a fine machine at the same time, to be repaired, not replaced, to last a generation. And the company behind it had, quietly, invented half of what television would become. Here's what almost everyone has forgotten about Zenith, and it's a lot. The wireless remote control sitting on your coffee table right now, Zenith invented it. Pay-per-view television, paying to watch a single event at home, Zenith invented that too, decades before cable. The crisp, digital, high-definition picture you're watching this very video on, the core system behind it was invented by Zenith and became the American standard. This was not some sleepy old furniture company that got left behind because it couldn't innovate. This was one of the most inventive consumer electronics companies America ever produced, a company that kept inventing the future of television right up until the moment it died. Which makes what happened to it so strange and so revealing, because Zenith wasn't killed by a lack of ideas. In a way, it was killed by the one idea it believed in most, that quality was worth paying for. To understand that, go back to two ham radio operators in a Chicago garage. Zenith began in 1918 in Chicago as a tiny operation called Chicago Radio Labs, founded by two amateur radio enthusiasts named Ralph Matthews and Carl Hassel. They built radio equipment for fellow hobbyists. The name Zenith came straight out of that world. It was a stretched-out version of their ham radio call sign, 9ZN, Zenith. The brand was born from the call letters two hobbyists used to reach out across the airwaves. In 1921, the company was joined by the man who would define it, Eugene F. McDonald. Under McDonald, Zenith Radio Company was formally incorporated in 1923 and grew into one of the great names in American radio through the 1920s and 30s: portable radios, car radios, push-button tuning. Then came television. Zenith built its first TV set in 1939, but held back from selling to the public, waiting until the technology and the broadcasts were ready. Its first commercial televisions went on sale in 1948, right at the dawn of the TV age, just as Americans were about to make the television the centerpiece of the home. Zenith was positioned perfectly, and the man steering it was one of the more colorful figures in American business. Eugene F. McDonald, the commander as he was known, was not your typical executive. He was an adventurer and a yachtsman who helped finance Arctic expeditions. He had made his first money as a schoolboy reading electric meters. He ran Zenith with a detailed, demanding, hands-on style and an obsession that would become the company's identity: quality. He believed that a Zenith product had to be better than the competition, that the customer should feel they'd bought something built to a higher standard, and he was willing to spend more to make that true. McDonald championed the things that made Zenith famous: the first portable multiband radios, an early push toward pay television, and a relentless drive to lead rather than follow. He set the culture that produced a slogan the company would live and die by. McDonald died in 1958. Just as the television era he had bet on was exploding into color. But the standard he set, quality first, cost second, outlived him, for better and eventually for worse. Out of that culture came one of the most famous slogans in American business. 4 plain words that meant everything. The quality goes in before the name goes on. It wasn't just an advertising line. It was a description of how Zenith actually operated. Every set was built to a standard, hand-assembled, tested, and designed to last. And only then did it earn the right to wear the Zenith name. The promise was that you weren't buying a disposable appliance. You were buying something made carefully by people who cared to serve your family for years. In the booming, optimistic America of the 1950s and 60s, that promise meant something real. A television was a major purchase, often bought on installments, expected to anchor the living room for a decade or more. When you chose a Zenith, you were buying that promise: handcrafted quality, built to last, backed by service. And to keep earning it, Zenith poured itself into invention, starting with the thing everyone now takes for granted: the remote. Through the post-war decades, Zenith behaved less like a furniture maker and more like a laboratory that happened to sell televisions. In 1950, Zenith launched something genuinely radical: Phone Vision, the world's first pay-per-view television system, letting a viewer pay to watch a single movie or event at home, decades before cable made that idea ordinary. The company pioneered FM multiplex stereo, the technology that lets a single FM signal carry stereo sound. It pushed portable radios and push-button convenience. And in 1961, Zenith introduced its first color television for consumers, bringing the rich, saturated color age into American living rooms, and true to form, building it to the same handcrafted standard. Their later chroma color sets became some of the most respected color TVs of the era. Every few years, Zenith seemed to invent another piece of the modern television experience. The company genuinely earned its reputation as a leader, not a follower. But of all the things Zenith dreamed up, one became so universal that it's now in every home on Earth, and most people have no idea it came from Chicago. Here is Zenith's greatest gift to the world, and the story is wonderful. In the early 1950s, getting up to change the channel was simply how television worked. Zenith's first attempt to fix that in 1950 was the Lazy Bones, a remote on the end of a long cable. It worked, but people kept tripping over the wire stretched across the living room. So in 1955, a Zenith engineer named Eugene Poley built the first truly wireless remote, the Flashmatic. It was shaped like a little ray gun, and it worked by shooting a beam of light at photocells hidden in the corners of the TV screen. It was advertised as a way to silence those long, annoying commercials. There was just one flaw. On a sunny day, light streaming through the window would change the channels all by itself. The fix came in 1956 from another Zenith engineer, Robert Adler, the Space Command, which used ultrasonic sound. Inside were tiny aluminum rods that, when struck, rang out high-pitched tones a human couldn't hear. No batteries needed at all. The TV listened with a little microphone, and because the buttons made a click, Americans started calling the remote the clicker, a name that stuck for generations. Zenith had taken the knobs off television. The thing in your hand right now was born in that Chicago lab. That remote, the clicker, became a small fixture of American family life, with its own quirks and its own battles. Because the early Space Command worked on sound, it had a famous side effect. Jingling a set of keys or dropping a metal pan on the kitchen floor could make the channel jump or the volume change on its own. Families learned the magic of it and laughed at the ghosts in the machine. And then there was the politics of it. In a house with one television and one clicker, holding the clicker was holding power. Grandfather guarded it from his chair. Kids begged for it. The person with the remote controlled the evening. The clicker became a tiny throne. That big Zenith console with its clicker and its glowing picture was the gathering place for the moon landing, the World Series, the shows the whole family watched together because there was one screen and everyone shared it. So tell everyone in the comments, did your family have a Zenith, and who in the house controlled the clicker? For a long stretch, Zenith stood at the very top of the American television industry, trading the #1 spot with RCA and dominating American living rooms with its handcrafted, made-in-America sets. But the ground was shifting. Through the late 1960s and into the 70s, American television manufacturing began to come under pressure, and one by one, the great American names started to fall or fold their TV businesses. Motorola sold its television operation to a Japanese company in the early 1970s. RCA, the original giant, would eventually pass into foreign hands. General Electric exited. The roll call of proud American TV makers grew shorter every year. And through all of it, Zenith held on. It became the last major American-owned television manufacturer, the final holdout, the one still flying the flag, still hand-building sets in the United States, still insisting that the quality went in before the name went on. But being the last one standing in a collapsing industry is not the same as winning. And the thing that was collapsing it was simple: price. The wave that overwhelmed Zenith came across the Pacific. Beginning in the 1970s, Japanese manufacturers, Sony, Panasonic, and others, flooded the American market with televisions that were well-made, reliable, and, above all, cheaper. They had modernized their factories aggressively, embraced automation and printed circuit boards, and could build a solid color TV for significantly less than Zenith's handcrafted sets cost to produce. And here is where Zenith's greatest strength became its fatal weakness. Its whole identity was handcrafted, American-made quality. The very thing that made its sets last 30 years also made them expensive and slow to build. Zenith had clung to its labor-intensive methods, proud of them, long after the rest of the world had moved to cheaper mass production. The "quality goes in before the name goes on" was a beautiful promise. It was also, increasingly, a confession that the company would not cut corners to cut prices. So American shoppers walked into the store and faced a choice: the proud, pricey, handcrafted Zenith or an imported set that looked just as good for noticeably less money. Again and again, they chose cheaper. Zenith did not go down without a fight, and that's part of what makes it tragic. It battled to cut costs, moving much of its production to Mexico, streamlining, modernizing where it could. It kept innovating, kept its name on respected sets, kept trying to hold the line on quality while shaving the price. But it was caught in an impossible squeeze. It couldn't get cheap enough to beat the imports without abandoning the very thing that made it Zenith, and it couldn't charge enough for its quality in a market that no longer wanted to pay for it. It lost money year after year through the 1980s and into the 90s. Because the deeper change wasn't really about Japan or Mexico or factories. It was about what a television had become in the American mind. It had stopped being a handcrafted heirloom you bought once and kept for decades and had repaired by a man with a case of tubes. It had become a commodity, a box you bought on price, used for a few years, and replaced. In a world that had decided televisions were disposable, built to last 30 years was no longer a selling point. It was just an expense. And then comes the part of the story that's almost too bitter to believe. Even as it was losing the war, Zenith was still inventing the future. In the early 1990s, Zenith engineers played a central role in developing the digital high-definition television system that would become the American HD TV standard, the foundation of the crisp, wide digital picture on every television sold today. The dying American company literally invented the future of television and handed it to the world. It didn't matter. The company was too far gone. In 1995, Korea's LG Electronics, formerly Lucky Gold Star, bought a controlling stake in Zenith. In 1999, Zenith files for bankruptcy and LG absorbed what was left, taking full ownership. The last great American television maker, the company that had invented the remote, invented pay-per-view, and invented digital HD, became a subsidiary of a foreign corporation. Think about that legacy. Zenith invented the remote in your hand and didn't survive to profit from it. It invented pay-per-view and didn't survive to see it conquer cable. It invented the HD standard and was bankrupt within 6 years of doing it. So what became of the quality goes in before the name goes on? Today, the Zenith name still exists, but as a budget brand owned by LG, stamped on inexpensive televisions sold at discount retailers. The company whose entire soul was handcrafted quality, whose proudest boast was that it would never put its name on anything cheap, is now literally a value label. The name that once promised the finest now promises the lowest. There's no crueler ending for a company than to become the opposite of what it stood for. And here's the part that should sit with you. Every television you own runs on Zenith's inventions, its remote, its HD standard, but not one of them is built the way Zenith built. Modern TVs are spectacular, enormous, razor-thin, brilliantly bright, almost unbelievably cheap, and almost none of them will last 30 years, or even 10. They are sealed, unrepairable, and designed to be replaced. We got exactly what we chose. We chose cheaper, and cheaper is what we got, in every sense of the word. For most of a century, the television in the American living room was a piece of furniture, built by hand, made to last a generation. And on the back of every one was a promise that the quality went in before the name went on. It warmed up slowly and glowed in the dark. It anchored the room and gathered the family. It was fixed, not thrown away, by a man with a case of tubes. It came with a little wand that took the knobs off television forever, and a name that meant something when you said it. The company that built it invented the remote, invented pay-per-view, and invented the high-definition picture you're looking at right now. And we let it go. Not because anyone built a better television, Zenith was inventing the future to the very end, but because someone built a cheaper one and offered at the store a set that looked just as good for less. We chose cheaper over and over until the last American television maker bled out and a foreign company bought its bones. The proud name that refused to go on anything but the best now sits on the bargain shelf. We gain televisions that are bigger, thinner, sharper, and astonishingly cheap. We lost the handcrafted set that lasted 30 years, the repairman at the door, and the last American television industry. The picture got better, the promise behind it disappeared. If your family ever gathered around a Zenith, ever fought over the clicker, ever watched the same screen for 20 years, you remember. Subscribe because there's another forgotten story already warming up.